It's my pleasure to be your moderator for this wonderful panel today. And now I'm going to invite our panelists to the stage and get started with asking questions. I know you all are eager to hear these questions answered today of what the heck happened in Tallahassee. I ask that every year. So please welcome Senator Jason Broder. Oh, bring coffee. Oh, bring coffee. I like it. I like it. Representative Joy Goff-Marcil. Representative Scott Plakon. Last but not least, Representative David Smith. So, session, 60 days plus some more. We'll talk about that second one too, a little bit. Leave some time for some questions. So be thinking of some good questions out there. It's a weird year. It's a weird year, strange year. So 1996 and every year since, I've been in Tallahassee for session, all are part of it. I think Adriana was in 5th grade when I started. I'm pretty sure. Somewhere, no? 96? And I didn't go up this year, and my company didn't want us going up this year. I begged them to let me up there this year, but they said no. And so I missed all the fun. So this session, I'll throw out some quick stats out there. So there are thousands of bills filed every year, but for specifically general bills filed, there were 1,839 of them. Out of appropriation projects filed, there were 1,060 of them. And there were 248 general bills passed by both chambers, some signed, many awaiting delivery to the governor and his disposition thereof, depending on what he wants to do. And so, you know, that's not a lot of, you know, end product that comes out of a lot of ideas that go into the beginning. And that process is what we're here to talk about today. Now, I want to tell you up front that a few days ago, I was just enjoying a nice walk with my dogs in the morning. And Rebecca asked me to pinch hit and fill in today because the person who's going to moderate was unable to. And my response was, oh my God, what happened to Chris Carmody? And is he okay? It turns out Chris is fine, and I am honored to be asked to be here to do this today. So let's get into it. Let's talk about it. It's kind of a loose script. I want all the members to chime in where they feel comfortable and chime in where they don't feel comfortable, because that's where the good stuff is. So first of all, I just want to ask you, you've all been there before. You're all veterans at this. What was it like to have session in a pandemic with the Capitol largely closed down? Let's talk about process first before we get into some particular things.
It was very strange, quite frankly. The walls were empty, you know, the halls were empty. And I kind of miss seeing people come from all over the state to petition their government. In fact, you know, in normal times, you see busloads of people coming up from the, you know, cattlemen in Osceola County to the LGBT groups, from Miami-Dade to the difference in the Panhandle. It shows you what a diverse state we have. It was really interesting, and none of that was there. I think in the Senate, they couldn't go in to testify. The House had slightly looser rules, but you know, I think that the concern there with tightening down the Capitol is, particularly in the Senate, 2 senators get sick, and I know the Senate Pro Tem got sick. It can affect a lot of things. So I think it was necessary in that process.
Yeah, it was very strange. And I agree with Rep. Plakon about, I missed seeing all the people that would come to my office and visit with me. That was a bad thing. The good thing is you could get on an elevator and get wherever you needed to be very quickly. So you could wait until the last minute to run to the floor and make it there on time. So I did like that part of it. And I hope elevators are really working better, because they seem to be working, but that's because nobody was there.
I just want to say thank you all for coming today, and thank the Seminole County Chamber. What a great organization. If you guys haven't been members yet, you should join. It was really strange because you're, as has been mentioned, you're so used to seeing, you go in at 8 a.m. and there's people everywhere and there's things happening and people are able to walk up to you and fill you in on everything that's going on in the Capitol. You have your own bills that you filed, and you're on your own committees of bills you're watching, but there's all sorts of other things happening that end up on Twitter or Facebook, or your constituents are calling that are important to them. And if I haven't seen it in committee, or I'm not running that bill, I don't have any news on it unless somebody comes up and tells me. I didn't realize how much I relied on the people I would run into on the way from my office to committee, or committee to the parking lot. Just all the people you would run into that would say, hey, did you see what happened with the PIP bill? I go, we're running a PIP bill? These are the things that didn't normally happen this last year, and it was really strange. The first half of session, it was awesome because nobody interrupted you. I could go into the parking garage. I walk all the way around the base of the Senate office building. I get in the elevator. I walk all the way around the third floor because my office is on the backside. I didn't see another single individual. You could run late. It was great. The second half of session was really boring, because that's the time when things heat up. That's the time when the controversial stuff starts moving. And that's the time when you need to be hearing from people the most often about frequent changes that are happening at each committee stop. And we just didn't have it. And Representative Plakon made the correct point that it was really frustrating to have all these lockdown procedures, but it was pointed out to us that if 5 or 6 or 8 people in the Florida House get COVID and are down, you still have 112 members left to operate committees, to chair meetings, to move legislation. If 6 or 8 or 10 senators go down, that's 25% of the organization. And now you need to reorganize committees. You lose chairmanships, legislation stops, committees don't even meet because some of our committees only have 5 members. 2 of them are out, we lose quorum. So we in the Senate took an enormous amount of precautions, and the slight difference there was that the House would allow people to go in who were going directly to a meeting for public testimony, and the Senate didn't allow anybody in that wasn't a senator or a staffer. And so we got public testimony from down the street. It was piped in video-wise. Staff did an excellent job. We were able to get 2-way communications, but it's nothing like having somebody in front of the podium and having the crowd there and having people. I mean, it's totally different. So happy to report that this other little bonus session that we got, things seemed back to normal. People were allowed in. You had proper protocols. There was recommendations just like there were everywhere. But I expect that next year we'll go largely back to normal.
Yeah, one of the other things, though, I agree with everything that's been said. I tell you, it was nice not having like the vulture lobbyists, that they just come into the Capitol and hang out all day and follow you into the men's room talking to you, those kind of people.
Not you, Dan, other people.
Not Dan. Dan, there it is. But this was a session to play defense. And a lot of folks we were probably just as productive with Zoom. And I probably actually had more Zoom meetings than we would have had where people came to the Capitol. So we were probably just as busy, just as effective with that input from constituents and groups that have issues before the legislature, because this was a time to play defense. We knew that this session was going to be dominated by COVID and policies coming out of that. So you just never can tell where somebody's going to try to, slip something in real quick and change something because when nobody's looking. And so there was a lot of that going on, but a heck of a lot of Zoom meetings this time, but it worked well. All in all, I was pleased with the amount of volume and the good bills that we did pass.
And we had to get COVID tested every single
Every
week
day.
before stepping in the Capitol, inclling the one where they put way up your nose.
Both kinds.
That was not
The
fun.
rapid test and the brain poking one every week.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So ask Rep. Smith hard questions. So while we're on the reason for all that, which is the pandemic and COVID-19, it affected many issues, but there was protections were passed through the legislature this year that affect the business community, liability, things like that. Very tricky to figure out, obviously complex. I mean, businesses want to run their businesses. They don't want to get sued. They want to do the best job they can. People want to feel safe in places. They don't want to get sick. Luckily, we're at a point now, I think we're coming out of that with vaccines, but who wants to take a first crack at what we did with liability protection for the business community on COVID?
All right, great. So all of you that are part of this organization know that we tried our best to make sure we could return as safely as possible and add the option online as we have today, that for folks who don't feel comfortable that they have that option too. And folks who were running businesses and members of our chamber were at a place where they would like to return to work. Their employees felt comfortable, their customers felt comfortable, but they were really worried about an opportunistic lawsuit by someone who may or may not have contracted or caught COVID at their place of business, and the ability for them to prove it. And so one of the things we did this session was we passed a liability protection law that said you need a physician to attest that you did contract COVID at that business, and that the defense for that is that you have made all reasonable precautions given the current health recommendations. And so right now, if we look at our CDC guidelines and some of our county health department guidelines, they are, and the governor's executive orders, they are that we continue to distance as much as we can. We make sure masks are an option for everybody, and we take all reasonable precautions for those that feel comfortable. We certainly can't know everyone's health status. We know that the information on this thing has evolved almost weekly and continues to do that. And so we wanted to make sure that if everybody felt like they were taking a reasonable amount of protection and risk, that businesses who chose to do that were opening themselves up to fraudulent or to opportunistic liability. And so that was part of what we did this year, was to make sure that we put that slightly higher threshold of evidential proof that you definitely contracted it from a fraudulent business before that business would be open to that kind of lawsuit.
Another thing somewhat related is I was glad that the governor took leadership in banning vaccine passports. There's been a movement around the country in certain areas. There's software providers now to create vaccine passports. That's where a lot of us just draw the line, that your decision to get vaccinated is a very personal decision, and to have to essentially expose your personal health status to various entities was just going too far. And I'm glad that the governor recognized that, and we were able to pass that out.
So I did vote no on that bill that the senator is referring to, because we had another bill that also protected businesses, but it also protected the people, the employees. And this bill, I thought, went too far and would protect businesses that were exercising gross negligence. So I did vote no on that bill. As far as the vaccine passport, I see both sides of it, because you could easily maybe do a fake one. I'm very concerned though about the cruise industry and how they're going to be able to succeed without having some kind of way of seeing how people are vaccinated. I know the thought of being out there in the ocean and not being allowed to come back in, which is what actually happened, is terrifying to think about. And just to think about spending all that money and going on a vacation and then having probably the most terrible experience of your life is also a very bad thing to think about. So I feel like there needs to be some independence in the businesses to be able to decide how they want to handle that, especially with their employees, and keeping them safe and keeping their customers safe as well.
Another interesting thing that came out of COVID from a policy perspective is the alcoholic beverages to go from restaurants. And I got to tell you, in my time, watching the legislature, yeah, right, there you go.
That's what got the applause, sir.
Yeah, it's a good room. I'm surprised to see that happen myself, because I just remember the fights of what they called in Tallahassee Merlot to go, which is if you're out, have a bottle of wine for dinner, you don't finish it, you can cork it and bring it. And I remember them, these folks and their predecessors at the time, arguing over how the original law would work, which is you'd have to put a cork in it, you had to put it in a bag, you had to staple the receipt to the bag, and you had to put the wine in the trunk. Was that yours?
That was mine.
That was yours? Yeah. Well, you
Trying to repeal it, not doing it. Trying to repeal it.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so, and you kind of laughed about it, because like, who's going to put it in their trunk and half bottle of wine and stuff like that.
And part of the law, if I could jump in
Oh,
here,
please.
requires that on the receipt that is stapled to the bag, that's folded over, that has the partially consumed bottle of wine in it, that's in the furthest back compartment of your car or your trunk and is locked and is a two-step process away, the receipt has to list the bread course. That says that in Florida statute. We don't list a bread course on receipts. They just don't. And so we knew that the law was silly anyway. So here's a little peek under the hood in Tallahassee. So I go to strike that, and they go, well, why would you want to get rid of that? And I said, well, it's dumb and it's not even possible. And so the packaged liquor store folks, and I love my folks from ABC and Publix Liquors and all of you, but they said, well, by making it easier for people to take partially consumed bottles of wine with them, you're de facto turning, Outback into a package store, because now instead of people drinking on the premises, they'll take it with them, and the bottle of wine they would have bought at our store is now being I said, if you think you're going to lose business because somebody wants to pay $30 for a $12 bottle of Kendall Jackson, that is insane. And they promptly went over to the other chamber and killed my bill. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So this year, tucked inside this bill was a modification of that law so that you no longer have to have a receipt like that. And the test run that we had during COVID, which allowed, with a food purchase, restaurants to be able to provide alcohol beverages in a sealed container, and you put them where you're supposed to put them. So we're not basically doing drive-through liquor stores. That worked. We didn't see the parade of horribles that we normally see when people say, well, if you did this, drunk driving is going to go through the roof. It didn't. It became more convenient. What we found from a lot of restaurant owners was, instead of them picking up chicken wings and then going to the store to pick up a six-pack, they would just get it all at the restaurant. So the restaurant owners loved it. They said that they're finally getting it all here. And we didn't see that. First of all, we saw a huge increase in the consumption of alcohol. I don't think that's a big shocker to anybody. And so nobody really saw a sales dip in this. We just saw more outlets for people to be able to buy things in a reasonable manner. And so that's kind of where that came. That law it's been like a 15-year arc of a law in Florida.
Yeah, it's so I think what the senator is trying to say is, at some point in this state, it was easier to carry a gun in your car, loaded gun, than a half bottle of wine. Yeah, it's crazy. So anyone else on that alcohol? I know Representative Plakon, you had some comments on it as the bill went through. Is it good, bad, and ugly on that? Is that we gonna be okay?
I don't remember the exact comments, but I worked with the sponsor on to make sure they aren't selling hard liquor by the bottle. And I forget exactly what the amendment was done, but excluded that possibility. That just didn't seem like a good idea at all. But the way it was originally written, so her office is right next door to mine, and we worked on to amend it to what I thought be more reasonable. And then I voted yes.
Yeah, well, great. So let's move to the budget a little bit. We've got the governor's about to take a look at a $101.5 billion budget. It's very huge. Going into the pandemic, we didn't know what was going to happen with the budget. What kind of draconian cuts. I think we were all expecting draconian cuts going in. We got some aid from the taxpayers of this great nation federally, who put some money into the budget as well from Congress. But and by the way, 101.5, I think, was a radio station I listened to as a kid. I don't know. Did you listen to that? No, that's just me. But let's go in order about what you're most, either we'll start at the end and come back this way, and we'll talk about, give us just off what budget items did you put in? What are you most proud of, especially that affect our area?
Okay, well, I have to start off with education, but again, the federal dollars, remember, that's money from your children and your grandchildren coming from the federal dollars. And we were spending money like drunken sailors. I mean, no offense to drunken sailors. I mean, we went into Tallahassee thinking we were going to have a hole in the budget and have to do these cuts. And then at the end, we had more money we really knew what to do with. And both issues are bad. Because money, maybe some things got some funding that shouldn't. However, that being said, I think what we did do that was the right thing to do was put more money into education. There is more money per pupil in the state of Florida than the history of the state. So we put our kind of money where our mouth was, because education is important. Part of that was COVID dollars, and part of that was teacher pay increases, a whole host of other things that were general revenue dollars. So if we really look at education as an investment and not as an expense, I think we did the right things. For me personally, part of the legislation, I did get 5 of my policy bills through and 6 of my appropriations funded. And the one I'm probably most proud of, it would be, as most of you know, I spent my career 30 years in the United States Marine Corps, one of the few combat veterans serving in the legislature today. But I was able to get over $1 million appropriation for UCF for their veterans PTSD clinic there. And And because I know with that appropriation, that's the way I pitched it too. It's going to save lives, and it's going to save lives of veterans, and we owe that to those people. And I was very happy to shepherd that through the process.
Last year, after last session, I was pleased to get 12 appropriations requests to the governor, and he did $1 billion worth of vetoes. And I think I had the best record in the House. 11 of them went into law. He only vetoed one of mine. So I try to be very careful of what I submit, and that is indicated that. So, but probably the two, I did a lot of notable ones, but many of you knew that I was married to Susie, who died of Alzheimer's, my late wife, Susie. And so Alzheimer's awareness and funding has been a passion for a number of years. Something called the Brain Bus, the memory mobile, travels around the state, about 300 stops, to help educate and help people struggling with Alzheimer's, particularly in underserved communities. It got cut down quite a bit this year, and I was able to work at the end of the session to fully restore the $319,000. Also, when people die of Alzheimer's, it's not an exact diagnosis. So the brain bank has been around for years, and we've typically got $100 and some thousand in appropriations. And working with the Speaker Pro Tem and others, we were able to get that to $500,000 this year. And it brings comfort to families that know what the diagnosis was. In fact, we had no idea. And in the case of my late wife, Susie, we thought it was Alzheimer's. Well, she also had Lewy body dementia simultaneously, and we would have never known that. It helps bring some understanding to it, and therefore some peace to some families. Also, the Seminole County Hope and Healing Center, we got a $400,000 appropriation to help people with the opioid problem.
I have plenty of ideas of where to spend that money that Russ was talking about. 40% of the budget was from the federal government, and I know most of that went into education, healthcare, and transportation, which are all very, very important issues and are much needed. So I was very thankful that we had that extra money. I would say I was very pleased with the amount of money that went to water and cleaning up the environment. We need to focus more on that, but that was good, and that supports our tourist industry. It's all good when we put money towards the environment. It's all good for business and for our everyday life and being able to drink clean water, which we all want to do. We can all agree on that. I voted no on bills that would go too far to take away access to courts. As an attorney, that is an important issue to me, and I don't believe in frivolous lawsuits, but I don't like some of these bills that went too far. And I guess this is a little bit off the topic of budget, but we're kind of talking about what we were doing up there. And I also voted no on bills that took away control from local governments, because that seems to be a trend in the legislature right now, taking away community control. So that's where I am with that. I was pleased that like I said, pleased that the money came down to us, much needed. Lastly, I wanted to say that I wish that we had focused more on the unemployment system and how badly that affected so many people back when the pandemic happened. I want to thank the senator for sponsoring a bill that I would have supported, but the House did not take that up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's a great lead-in, by the way, because I did a lot of the water project bills, so we'll talk about those. So I did, I had I think a pretty good session. I mean, obviously there was a ton of money floating around, but the places we put it, I think, were really aligned with what we have said as a community are really important to us. Specifically, 5 local projects that I got funded totaling $2 million, helped address the opioid addiction prevention and recovery, including $400,000 for the Hope and Healing Center with the Sheriff's Office. So thank you to former Representative Cortez for coordinating with the sheriffs, and that is a a local project that's going to help a great deal. $1.85 million for projects to support those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I've always been a big advocate for helping the most vulnerable, and that means putting our money where our mouth is. And so in this, we did a lot of projects. We got money for Operation Grow, which is Inspire, which is the former SWAP. We got money for the Grove. We got money for Boys and Girls Club prevention programs, Fostering Our Future, faith-based innovation, and some transportation programs that would help those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that was a big one. $710,000 for Seminole State College. Get them a new roof and enhance their trade programs. So thank you. Part of what I talked about was that college isn't right for everyone. But what that also means is that we need to invest in programs that are going to help folks find vocational training right as they come out of high school. This is going to help enhance their construction trade program. If anybody's tried to buy a 2x4 recently, you'll recognize it's a little more expensive than a car. That's a booming industry, not surprisingly. And so we want to make sure we bolster that as a vocational program and an option for our local folks as well. We did over $1 million in local water projects, most notably helping restore the Little Wekiva River. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but we dried up. With construction of I-4, it's a great program. These things happen. We had a hurricane come through. We had a massive construction there. The headwaters of the Little Wekiva are very close to where the Longwood exit is for I-4. So a lot of that debris runoff may have diverted some of this before. Well, we need to restore it. And so we got money in there to help do that. We also had a lot of money. Where is the septic to sewer retrofit in Wekiva Springs? We know that a lot of our pollution, our blue-green algae problems, come from macronutrient growth, most notably nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. And a lot of that has to do with leaching of septic tanks. And it's nobody's fault in particular. We just need to make sure we're funding programs that allow residents the option to get back onto a main sewer line and eliminate that as a source of contaminant. And so we were able to get a giant amount of money to help folks over in the Wekiva area, where we have some of our most sensitive high magnitude spring septic tank interaction, and allow them some more money to get them off of septic and onto sewer. And then lastly, $200,000 for the bear-resistant trash can program to help those in Western Seminole County. So, we got bears here. And so we're doing our best to make sure that, again, the local residents have the option to protect themselves and their families. Last thing is Puerto Rican Community Legal Services Clinic. Again, former Representative Cortez worked with this. We typically fund a lot of legal services for folks who don't otherwise have the mechanism for it. And we didn't have an outlet for the Puerto Rican community. So this year, we're very happy to do it. And Juvenile Drug Court of Seminole County, I think we mentioned that. So thank you all very much. We had a great year this year for Seminole County, I think.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. Glad to hear all of that. One thing that's been going on in the legislature for years, hotly debated, is the online sales tax issue. And finally, the legislature was able to act on that. And does anyone want to take a stab at what happened there, or explain to everyone here what happened? I mean, it was, some people see it as a tax increase, some see it as helping small local businesses level the playing field. How did you all see it, Representative Plakon?
Well, let's start with the truth. The truth is it's not a tax increase. Despite what some said, the truth is, in fact, today, everything is truthiness and my truth and your truth. That's why I say, let's talk about the truth and what it actually is. The truth is before this bill, all that stuff you buy on Amazon and other retailers, under the law, you're supposed to pay taxes on it, or you're breaking the law. And I suspect there's a few people in this room that have broken the law, maybe more than one. So all this does is an enforcement mechanism, really, for a tax that's already exists and on the books. And there were some people calling it a tax increase. And again, I think that is not, in fact, I know that is not consistent with the truth. It hasn't been, I mean, this is my opinion, over years, this idea has been around. And I think that what's held it back is the political consequences of somebody saying it's a tax increase. And it's simply not. But somehow the moon and the stars aligned, and we're able to get it done this year. And I think it's a good thing. I think in committee, I compared it to the immigration situation in a weird way. We have laws on the books on what immigration policy should be in the United States. And those laws are just ignored. So Congress should either change them or we should enforce them. So the same thing with this tax. It's a tax on the books, and I'm glad that we are enforcing it. and it'll bring in about $1 billion a year, and there's that.
One of the other things, as Scott mentioned, the enforcement piece, is it's, everybody know that the tax was owed. Some people paid it. And most retailers, whether you buy on Target online or Amazon online, they charge the sales tax and remit it back to the states. However, why I supported the bill, and I co-sponsored the bill a year ago when we tried to run it in the 2020 session, glad we got it passed now. There are out-of-state businesses that are collecting that sales tax from Floridians, and they don't remit it back to the state. They're just flat out ripping us off. But we had no enforcement mechanism, and now we do. And that was one of the major reasons why I supported the bill.
Please.
Yeah, I was just want to say, it's a flat tax, an aggressive tax, so it's flat among everyone and it affects the most vulnerable the most. But I would still be okay with it if the money that the revenue generated from it would more help the vulnerable among us. And so that was a concern.
Great. I want to touch on,
Yeah, what we're doing with those.
So this has to do with where we decided to put it. First, on the tax itself, imagine you do your tax return and you do your tax return every year. You have the same job. You have the same job, you have the same tax return, nothing's changed, and every year you should owe money, but the IRS never sends you a letter. This year you do your tax return and the IRS sends you a letter. That's not a tax increase. They just never collected it before. So that's the justification that it's not a tax increase. It was always owed. It was just never collected. And so when we talk about the unemployment system, and it seems like it's not related, but it is, that is a system that operates out of a trust fund. It is different than what we would call an entitlement program. Something like Medicaid's an entitlement program. If you qualify for it, you get it. Things like pensions and the unemployment system are in trust funds. They're like, to borrow a term from Al Gore, they're a little black box. And under normal circumstances, this trust fund operates independently. It is funded completely by the businesses who pay into it, and the money that comes out goes directly to the beneficiaries who qualify for that program. In March of last year, we had between 24 and 28,000 people accessing the unemployment system. In May, we had 2 million. That is more people that accessed the unemployment system in May than had accessed our unemployment system in the previous 8 years combined. So we knew we had to make some changes, and we did. We did some mechanical changes with the software and that kind of thing. But if you have a standalone trust fund that's serving 24,000 people, and now 2 million are accessing it, it's going to get drawn way, way down. And so the money that we're going to get from collecting the taxes that were never collected before is going to go into that, so we don't have to have a massive tax increase on the business and which in fact is a de facto tax increase on the employees who pay into it. Because remember, not everyone gets unemployment. You have to have had a job that you lost. You have to have paid in. It's like a pension system. If you don't work for the state and pay into it, you don't get a pension. So this is some way that we can help bolster this to help get the economy back on track faster, so that we're not saddling businesses who are just coming out of this pandemic with massive tax increases. This helps smooth us out over time so they can focus on employing people instead of paying their taxes.
great. I wanted to thank you for that. I want to transition a couple more things, and I do want to leave some time for questions because I know you've been working on these hard while we've been doing this here. Y'all finished the regular session. That was like hermetically sealed envelope that no one could get in. And then like a couple weeks later, you came back, and then it was like Mardi Gras in the Capitol. You can go wherever you want. And you went and talked about gaming because it was like Mardi Gras. So you want to have fun. And so we did a gaming compact, which was very important to the governor. That was interesting how that all played out. You know, there was a bipartisan vote on that. Interested in anyone, whoever would like to start on what happened and your perspective on the compact.
Well, I voted for it. I know Scott voted against it, but so let me go first. It's a good bill. It's the compact which is a 30-year deal between the state of Florida and the Seminole tribe. It's a good deal, not a great deal. I think we could have spent a little bit more time on it, maybe been able to make it a little bit better. But when we got there Monday morning, the 17th, it was the old, hey, good to see you again, you know, kind of thing. Everybody's back. But we all knew it was either going to be an early week or a long week. And then when the Speaker of the House took the rostrum and started speaking, pulled out an amendment to the compact that I think an hour before or so had just been signed that eliminated the possibility of being able on your phone to play roulette and blackjack and poker and that type of online gambling on your phone was very problematic. And the amendment to the compact precludes that from ever happening. You'll be allowed to do sports betting if that's approved through the courts, but not the things that maybe could lead to problems with compulsive gambling and or underage gambling, those kind of things. Because I don't believe we had the votes in the House to pass any bill that Monday morning. But with that amendment, people said, okay, I can support this now. I would have liked to have seen some of the a minimum of $500 million a year that the state of Florida is going to get from this compact. Because you may recall over the last couple of years, the Seminole tribe has paid the state of Florida nothing because the state of Florida breached the contract. We were the problem with the Seminole tribe. So this new compact fixes many of the old problems, guarantees the state $500 million. I would have liked to have seen a portion of that money fenced for teacher pay raises. I wanted to, much like the lottery where there's money that goes into education, I would like to have seen some of that, but that dog just didn't hunt. It's all going to go into general revenue and it'll be spent as the legislature deems fit. But it's a good bill, not a great bill. It's still got to get through the courts. The bill sponsor, Chairman Randy Fine from Brevard County, even in his closing, when he presented the bill on the House floor, does not believe it will survive unscathed through the court process because it will be challenged in state court as being unconstitutional, violating what we passed as Amendment 3 in 2018, and then in federal court, because you really got to believe that what they call the hub and spoke, that I can place a bet on my phone here in Seminole County, but the bet is taken on a server that's on tribal land, you know, and therefore the bet is actually made on tribal land, because remember the compact is only on tribal land. So that's got to get to the federal court. But I voted for it. It passed 97-17. 9 Democrats and 8 Republicans voted against it for whatever reason. But it's a good deal for Florida. Not a great deal, but we need that $500 million so we can do things like teacher pay raises and some of the other things. When those federal dollars are going to run out, federal COVID dollars run out, we've now got a new income stream or revenue stream for Florida to take on some of the additional challenges that we're seeing, like sea rise, resiliency, and other issues, water projects that Senator Broder talked about. So I voted for it. I thought it was a good bill.
We'll do a counterpoint with, I see Representative Plakon taking copious notes over here. And then as soon as you're done with that, taking about 42 seconds to do that, we're going to do a question or two, but run late.
Well, I was one of those 8 Republicans that voted no, and you'll get to enjoy Republicans up on this panel for once disagreeing. So, gambling in the state of Florida, opposing it has been a Seminole County initiative for more than a decade. Back to Bob Cortez and I, when he was on the Longwood City Commission, fighting the dog room to get the card dog track to get a card room. And I've got a long record of voting against the expansion of gambling in the state of Florida. These gambling bills are complicated, though. Is it an expansion or not? Sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder. It may expand here and contract there. So I was leaning no, and I got a call from the governor. Of course, you've heard that I was leaning no. Well, after getting from a lot of his staff, they were calling members and helping to educate us. And he made the case that if we don't do this, that casinos will work their way in through the constitutional amendment process. So I told him over the weekend I'd consider it, but then I called Monday and said I've got to be a no vote because and believe me, telling the most popular governor in America no is not fun, I will tell you. So, but it's just something that's been a long standing thing that I've worked on. I did vote yes on the other bills. The parimutuel bill, which had some expansion, some contraction in it. And the Gaming Control Commission, I think, is a very, very critical part of this whole thing. Back in the, you guys may remember the internet cafe days. I filed the legislation originally to shut them down. And in 2013, I get a call from Sheriff Esslinger, who led the charge, along with now Sheriff Lima, saying there's going to be a press conference at 1 o'clock. And I get there, there's Attorney General Bondi, the FDLE, Secret Service, U.S. Marshal, FBI, and some others I'm forgetting, and 57 people arrested in one day. So this Gaming Control Commission is an important part of this whole thing. It doesn't have jurisdiction over the tribe because they have their own internal procedures to make sure they have good, or legal and all that kind of thing. I've heard it described as the protector of the compact because back in 2012, when I had the internet cafe bill, one of the things in me working with the tribe back then was if we don't shut these down, they were seeing it as a violation of the compact, and it was. So going forward, despite my no vote, this is going to move forward. And interestingly, a lot of the reporters up there knew my history with this. Literally, as soon as the session ended, I had 5 of them come up to me, and 2 of them asked me, "Are you going to apply for this?" Because it forms a new commission of 5 members that would identify and have enforcement authority to shut these down, thereby protecting the compact. Now, on the compact itself, if it did not have the sports betting feature, I could almost get there on a yes, because most of the stuff the tribe is doing anyway, and we're getting paid 0. So my hope is and I don't think it's hope against hope. I think there's a strong possibility the courts, I was glad to hear that it was severable too, so they could strike down the sports betting part of it, and what ends up is the tribe is paying us for most of what they were doing already. So I hope that's the case. And they're asking if I'm going to apply to this. My wife, Rachel, many of you met, we decided we're going on an RV trip this summer, probably decide when we get back, see friends and loved ones around the country. So, but I didn't like saying no to the governor, trust me.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. 2 quick questions. We're already a little late. I see one gentleman way in the back who I know I'm having dinner with.
Great question. I think there's 2 answers to that. Number 1 is it's probably the next iteration of where we try and go with protecting our most vulnerable. There were a number of bills that were done this year to help foster kids in transition, foster kids with siblings. One of the most solemn things we do as a society is take someone's liberty. And when we do that, we normally think of them being arrested and jailed. That's how we take liberty. But the other way we do it is in an organization like Joe's, at a CBC, and in conjunction in Seminole County with the sheriff's office, is removing a child. They've been reported that there's some kind of incident going on, and this child gets removed and put in foster care. And we have to have a comprehensive process by how we do that, because we are really removing liberty when we do that sort of thing, rightfully or wrongly. As those children move through the system, they are in need of a lot more services than most what we would consider a more normal avenue, particularly around medical, healthcare, trauma-informed care, our adverse childhood events, all of the metrics that we look at when we look at that sort of thing. And personal health information is a big part of that, because in order to coordinate those services, you need to be able to do it. So the good news is, I think, number one, that's the next kind of iteration. And the function is, like anything else, is money. And as information gets cheaper, more available to store, and more secure, it's a higher likelihood that we're actually going to be able to integrate the PHI in there, so that those kids who have very complicated and complex needs as they come through the system will be able to get that delivered. So I think it's probably a high likelihood over the next couple of years.
See over there. We have time for one more. Note that's you. No, no two-part questions. Quick questions.
Is this one working? Is it working? Okay. Yes, I'm very supportive of affordable housing. So I don't know if I would say, I don't want to say 50% or say an exact amount, but I have always been supportive of keeping the Sadowski Fund in place and not taking away from it and putting in other places. So anything we can do to get the affordable housing situation under control is going to be good for all of us, because we need those workers. We need the teachers and the police officers and all the tourist industry workers to be able to afford to live here.
Most of us only see that when we have the final budget, and I know it had a cut this year, but last year it was fully funded. But then the federal government stepped in, the governor vetoed, but this effect was the same, was fully funded. But you know, every year they call them, there are trust funds, but every 2 years we get a new legislature with differing priorities, and they change. So last year there was 100% funding. This year it was less. And just because, you know, just because the word is trust fund, you can't bind a future legislature from allocating those funds as they see fit. But I think you'll find most of the people up here were very supportive. A lot of the initiatives of the realtors, being particular, you know, people that are in favor of small business or small business owners. And, you know, I took it a step further and I married one, Rachel, so.
I think
Very quickly.
go ahead.
Yeah, you know, the greater Orlando area leads the nation in two areas. One is the worst affordable housing, and the other is a vehicle via pedestrian accidents. You know, neither one of them good. So everyone knows that there's an affordable housing crisis. The other side of that is, when is a trust fund not a trust fund? Well, when it's under the Florida legislature, because we swept it year after year for Sadowski. We did not do that last year. We did not do that this session. In this just recent legislative session, there is more money, like education, there is more money put into affordable housing than in the history of the state of Florida. Now, a lot of those are federal dollars, and we completely overhauled what was known as the Sadowski Trust Fund. So now there's like 3 pots of money. It'll be affordable housing, resiliency, which is sea rise around the coastal area, and then inland flooding, which we absolutely have an issue with in Seminole County. Just go out to Midway sometime after a light rain, and you'll see what inland flooding's about. However, the good thing about the legislation that we just passed, you cannot sweep that money. So there's going to be a pot of money every year that's unsweepable from the legislature, dedicated to affordable housing. And as real estate and dock stamps and all that, that will continue to go up. But we're going to come up on a spike for affordable housing, and then come down a little bit, and then hopefully it'll start coming back up as more real estate continues to do well. So I think the legislature did as best a job we could this session, putting as much money as we could stuff into affordable housing. And when I first read the bill, I didn't like it. And then I really sat down and learned and worked with staff. And then I'm like, okay, I can support this. So I voted for that bill.
Well, great. This was a lot of fun and very informative. I hope you all found it so. I'm going to invite Rebecca back up. There's so many things I wanted to get to. We didn't have time. I want to talk about how drones, the law enforcement can use drones to chase cars. Sorry we didn't get to that because I think that's pretty cool and safe. But Rebecca, please close this out.
Thank you so much, Dan, and please join me in thanking all of our legislators. We so appreciate your time. A few quick announcements before you guys run. There is a door prize, so don't leave. If you are not a member yet of the chamber, please see Christina. She's doing her princess wave, and she can give you information. There are flyers and programs on your seats. Please take them with you. They have upcoming events like our Good Morning Seminole next Thursday that's going to talk about the labor crisis. I'm sure all of you are trying to find workers. Our annual meeting is June 17th at Topgolf. Please make sure to register. We take our board vote there, and we're also having a Topgolf golf tournament. I've heard a rumor that Jason Broder thinks that he's going to win, so please challenge him. Thank you again to our sponsors, Central Florida Regional Hospital, AT&T, Seminole County Economic Development, Gray Robinson, Fairwinds, Highland, Florida Power and Light, University of Central Florida, Wharton Smith, and CPH. Congratulations to Carol East from Label Hoarders. You got a $25 gift card to Home Depot, courtesy of Mobot. And thank you to the Marriott. Have a great Seminole County day.